Hey, what's going on, guys? Kane here. And if you didn't already gather it from my Death Battle 10-year anniversary video, I'm a really big fan of the show. They've been my favorite web series for almost 6 years now, and I've wanted to make some videos on them for a long time. So today, I'm going to start doing it, and the video to kick it off will be a ranking of all of the fight animations of Death Battle's 7th season. Why only the fights, you may be asking? Well, simply put, if I reviewed each episode as a whole, they'd roughly all be the same. I pretty much enjoy each episode the same amount, and the only part that my opinion usually varies on are the fights. Also, if you somehow haven't figured this out yet, this video will probably contain spoilers of every single episode this season. So watch all of them before this one if you don't want spoilers. So with that out of the way, we're going to be going from worst to best, and at the end I'll even say what I thought of the season as a whole. So let's start off with number 20. Black Canary vs. Sindel is definitely my least favorite of the season. It just has nothing going for it. I'll start with the positives. The track is actually pretty good, even if it's forgettable. The effects are for the most part pretty good looking. I like the scene where Canary gets her fucking ribs snapped. And the start of the fight is done pretty well, but after that it just gets worse. The choreography is really boring. The death is big lame. The facial expressions are a real hit or miss. Sometimes you get a really good-looking one, and sometimes you get this. Sindel's hair animation is dog shit, and I hate it, and overall the fight is just really boring. Not a good way to follow up a premiere this good. Batgirl vs. Spider-Gwen shouldn't exist. Nothing about it stands out, and it really upsets me that the SFM team were wasting on such a bland-ass matchup. But let's talk about the fight. It is not good. The choreography in it was so unbelievably boring. There were such dumb and boring scenes at times. Like when Batgirl had this setup to what could have been a really cool moment, but then ruins it by delivering the most half-ass kick I've ever seen. Or the way she hits her leg on a falling rock. I can name so many more dumb scenes, but I don't have all day. The setup is non-existent. They also tried to incorporate the environment a lot, and it sometimes worked, like with the giant penny, but most of the time it just fell flat. Also, the track is just decent. It's not bad, but it doesn't stand out at all. So, why isn't this episode last? Well, it's because even with all the bad, there is very little bit of good. Even though the choreography is dog shit, overall the animation is actually pretty good. The effects look nice, and the backgrounds do too. Speaking of background, it's cool to have a Batman fight actually take place in the Batcave, even if they don't use it too well. There's also one actually really well choreographed scene that genuinely looks amazing, and that's about it. The death is okay, but the stupid face Batgirl makes after it slays me, and the fight was about as same as the matchup. Really average and boring as all hell. When I heard the next matchup was Zuko vs. Todoroki, I was really excited. That excitement immediately faded when I saw the animation. I'll start with the negatives first. The puppet animation in this fight is absolutely awful. Pretty much every movement either character makes is janky as hell, and it really holds the animation back a lot. I mean, the fucking Cabbage Man's animation is better than theirs. Like, come on! The choreography isn't bad, but it's really nothing special. The setup is also really bad and out of character. The dialogue isn't very good either, with a lot of missed opportunity for jokes. For positives, there's the fact that all the hand-drawn elements, except for this really awful drawing right here, are all really well made and fit really well in the fight. However, what's really saving this fight is the fact that pretty much everything after Zuko breaks out of the giant ice thingy, I forgot its name, is really good and well choreographed. We get this awesome shot of Todoroki's eye as the track reaches a bombastic ending, all leading to a great shot mimicking the anime, and then a really good death. If the entire fight was as good as the ending, it'd be around an 8 out of 10, but sadly, everything before it is absolute dog shit. How the fuck do you do this matchup and not make the fight 2D? Like, are you serious? Anyways, Danny vs. Jake was pretty okay. Let's start with the good stuff. The voice acting is really good and the dialogue fit both characters really well. Once they leave the museum, the animation and choreography gets much better and the effects look really nice throughout. Plus, the clone vs. clone battle was genuinely really good and is miles ahead of everything else in the fight. As for negatives, the death was kind of boring. I like that they put Jake in as a ghost in the end, but it was just... the death itself was boring. Everything else wrong with the fight is at the start. First off, they barely did anything with the museum setting, and it could have easily just been a random building. Secondly, the choreography is really bad. Everything was so slow and janky, and it just sucked so much. Honestly, this fight is really similar to Zuko vs. Todoroki for me. Both had awful starts, but really picked up towards the end. The difference is that Danny vs. Jake's bad segment wasn't as bad, and their good segment lasted longer, so they beat out Zuko vs. Todoroki. Overall, this fight's just okay. It could have been so much more, though. Venom vs. Chrono was just okay, and that's about it. I really liked the battle in the sky. It was cool and well animated. I liked Venom's Nightmare Before Christmas quote, along with the rest of the dialogue. The effects were mostly good. Voice acting was good. Chrono's puppet animation was good. Basically, a lot of stuff was just good. As for negatives, it felt like Venom was destroyed in the fight. He didn't get many hits in. The choreography wasn't anything special until they left the church. They didn't do that much with the setup or the background. And the death itself was pretty good, but the build-up was shit. I just don't have much to say about this one. It's just okay. So far, Rock Lee vs. Sanji has easily been the biggest letdown of the season. I absolutely love this matchup, and it sucks that it didn't live up to its fullest potential. Anyways, let's start with pros. I really like the backgrounds in this fight. They might be the best of the season, and they are probably better than the actual fight. Handsome Lee was fucking hilarious, the effects are once again good, go figure, and the track was okay. Some of the choreography was good, and lastly, Sanji was portrayed really good. His voice and dialogue was good, his animation looked clean, and I loved the moment where he used Lee's own leg to do Diablo Jambe, and the observation hockey moment was cool. His raid suit animations were nice, and his killing blow was cool, and it was nice to see it in 2D. Plus, his line after the death was cool too. Now, if you're wondering why only Sanji is in the pros, it's because Lee was done fucking dirty in this fight. First off, his voice acting is shit. His voice actor is a good voice actor, but his voice doesn't fit Lee at all in the slightest. Secondly, he barely uses any of his abilities. Granted, Sanji doesn't use many either, but at least he uses more than Lee. Lee used the Hidden Lotus, the Sleeping Elephant, and that's it. No Leaf Whirlwind, no Primary Lotus, no Morning Peacock, nothing else. He rushed through his gates way too quickly. I mean, the state he's in the longest time for was his fucking drunken fist. Plus, they didn't even have him take off his fucking weight. How do you bring Rock Lee into a death battle and not let him take off his weight? For problems other than Lee's portrayal, there's the fact that both characters land barely any meaningful hits. Most of the time, they just get hit and don't care. And overall, the fight is just not that good in choreography-wise. Overall, if you want a good Rock Lee vs. Sanji fight, just go watch the 1 Minute Melee. Genos losing is actually a really cool reference to the show. Anyways, Genos vs. War Machine wasn't a match I was particularly excited for, and the fight really didn't help that. The 2D animation, despite being a complete waste on this episode, is really well done, especially the effects. This episode has some of the best looking effects of the entire season, but the animation can't fix the choreography. There's some really cool scenes like War Machine's bitch slap and their beam clash, but for the most part it was just pretty dull and not that interesting. They did portray the characters well. Genos got to use pretty much all of his abilities, and he looked really good. War Machine wasn't as good. He didn't get to use that much. I mean, his whole thing is that he's Iron Man with guns, yet he only uses the guns like once. But at least both voice actors were really good. The death was kind of lame, and the track was good but forgettable. Basically, everything this episode has in pros is counteracted by its cons, but the animation does save it. Time really hasn't been kind to this episode. I used to really like Grey vs. Death, to the point that it actually used to be my favorite sprite fight of the season for some time. But it's lowered quite a bit on rewatch. The choreography isn't nearly as good as I remember, and some scenes were just boring. The animation was, for the most part, good. Sometimes the puppets looked really good, but other times it looked really shit. I wish they used more of the characters' abilities, maybe use them to counteract each other's, having them trying to outsmart each other. That would have been really cool and also in character. The death was really boring, and the fight also felt really short. As for positives, I really liked the start. The choreography there was really good, and it had me really excited. The ice storm scene was really good, but what really cares this episode is the track. Lost Ice Storms is incredible and single-handedly brings this fight up a good amount. But overall, the fight is just meh. She-Ra vs. Wonder Woman is such a stupid fucking matchup. I actually really like the matchup itself, and I think it's a really fitting opponent for both. The problem is that this is now Wonder Woman's third time on this show, and it's getting old. Oh well, let's talk fight. First up, positives. The animation is really good. Aside from the effects, which are actually just okay, the animation in this fight is amazing. There's these two sword fight scenes where the choreography, animation, and camera work are all done so well to make it one of the best scenes in the entire season. Both characters are portrayed really well, they got to use a bunch of their abilities, and their voice acting was really good. Now on to negatives. Other than those two fight scenes I mentioned earlier, most of the choreography is just okay. It's not bad, but it's not good either. It's made worse by how out of scale the characters are. In this fight, we have two characters that are both at least moon level, and in the fight, the most they destroy is a fucking plane. They're just so out of scale. The death is also pretty lame, just a beheading with a somewhat cool effect, and the track is so forgettable I actually forgot this fight even had one. In conclusion, the fight is really saved by its animation and sword fighting scenes, and other than that, it's just okay. When I first wrote down my ranking of Cable vs. Booster Gold, I had it actually pretty low. So I was really happy that when I rewatched it, I liked it a lot more than I remembered. The choreography wasn't nearly as bad as I remembered, with some genuinely really cool and well-animated scenes, especially in the start. The time travel was worked in really well, and it was cool to see all the different locations. Both characters got to use almost all of their abilities, plus there was great banter throughout the fight, making it pretty funny. The setup was hilarious, and the death was brutal. I liked both of those. The fight is held back a bit by its negatives, though. Days of Booster Pass was a forgettable track. The fight felt kind of short, too, and overall the episode didn't have that wow factor to really push it farther up the list. But it's still a pretty good fight that I'm glad I liked more on rewatch. I really wish this one was higher. It had so much potential in it. Luckily, the fight we did get was still pretty good, if underwhelming. I'll start with cons since I want this to end on a high note. So firstly, there isn't as much banter as you'd expect from a fight between the Reds and Blues. I mean, of all people, you'd expect this fight to have a good amount of banter. Then there's the way they shaft a good amount of characters. Both Donut and Simmons do fuck all in the fight, and both Sheila and Tex never even talk. And the way they use Caboose to just kill a bunch of people feels really lazy. Granted, 10 characters is a lot, so I can't be too hard on them. There also definitely could have been more action. There are only really two main fights, that being Sarge vs. Tex and Tucker vs. Lopez, with Church vs. Donut and Tex vs. Griff as mini fights as I'd call them. I feel like I could have added maybe one more main fight. It also felt really unfair for the Reds. Aside from Sheila, the Reds don't kill a single Blue themselves, and that's really weird. And lastly, the death was lame. It's fitting, but it doesn't not make it boring. They could have had a cool-ass scene where Caboose goes into rage mode of just seeing Church dead and start beating the ever-living shit out of Sarge, but instead he just dies to a grenade. Now for positives. The setup was really good. It was long, fitting, and had really good jokes. Secondly, the animation is stunning. The textures, lighting, character movement, and effects all look amazing and are maybe even the best of the season. I also love how they were able to emulate the machinima style of the show in the fight. There weren't a lot of fights, but the ones we got were pretty good. Especially the brief fight between Tucker and Lopez. That one is amazing. The camera work in it is so damn good, and it's one of my favorite parts of the seasons. In fact, camera work in the entire fight is really good. The dialogue was good even if there wasn't much of it, and overall the fight is good. And I honestly can't hate on it too much since it did get me into Red vs. Blue, which is currently my third favorite show of all time. So, overall, fight was pretty good, even if it didn't live up to its potential. Leo vs. Jason honestly gave me about everything I expected from the matchup. I wasn't expecting it to be amazing, but I felt it had good potential, which it luckily lived up to. The retro aesthetic is really well done, and it fits the characters and the fight really well. The dialogue and voice acting is good. The choreography is really good at some points, but just okay at others. The setup is really funny, and I can actually see it happening. The animation is good, and the track is good, but a bit boring. For things I didn't like, the death is just okay. The build-up and actual kill itself just weren't interesting. I also think that the hand-drawn portions look really out of place in this fight. I already mentioned that sometimes the choreography is boring, so I won't repeat myself, though. All in all, it's a pretty good fight, even if the retro aesthetic kind of carries. Beerus vs. Galaxia is a fight that I don't know why I don't love. It has all the pieces there for a really great episode. The animation is really good. The effects are downright incredible as well. The amount of destruction in the fight is cool to see, and the death is pretty good, and is made even better by the amazing lines Beerus drops before and after it. The fight is pretty funny with some solid gags. Both characters got to use a bunch of their abilities, and Beerus was portrayed amazing. I like this setup, and overall it's good, but it definitely feels like it's missing something. First off, I don't think Galaxia was done too well. Her sprites are sometimes pretty janky, and her dialogue was just bad. The track also is just okay, but at least it gets really good in the middle portion. But what really holds it back is the choreography. In a lot of scenes, it's just real hit or miss. Sometimes it's cool and engaging, and other times it's just slow and boring. Overall, it's good, but it's just not amazing. I still like the episode, though, even if it is beat out by its original premiere. It's honestly insane how much Yzma Hawk improved after Nightwing vs. Daredevil. Red Hood vs. Winter Soldier improved on pretty much everything. The choreography is amazing. The hand-to-hand combat is so cool looking, and it looks real, too. This fight actually manages to make it look like they're actually beating the shit out of each other. The way they use the setting is awesome as the fight slowly transitions to different areas. The camera work is some of, if not the best in the season. The starting hand-to-hand brawl and the knife fight looks so clean and smooth. The character design also looks great. The metal arm and Red Hood's helmet are so cool looking. The fight is genuinely movie quality in terms of choreography and camera work, but it's held down a bit by its negatives. First off, the track is really boring and forgettable. I also used to really like Jason's PTSD scene, but over time I've come to really dislike it. It's not very in character and not as cool as I remember, and it really stops the pace of the fight. Finally, there's the shitty death, which is the one thing this episode didn't improve on from Nightwing vs. Daredevil. Its concept is really cool, but it's executed so unbelievably poorly. In conclusion, really high quality fight, but it's held down a bit by its negatives. Speaking of that original premiere I mentioned earlier, Miles vs. Static was amazing. I want to start with the negatives. So first off, the setup is kind of weak. It doesn't really give them a reason for fighting. It just kind of happens. I also really don't like the keep sticking and stop sticking scene. It's boring and it stops the pace of the fight a lot. And that's about it. I actually tried coming up with more negatives, but I actually couldn't. So let's talk positives. The track is amazing. Lots of Danger is awesome and it fits both characters really well. Secondly, the puppet animation is incredible. Easily the best of the season. Every movement looks so damn smooth and it's just animated so well. The animation is made even better by the awesome choreography. There are so many great scenes like the fight on the saw at the beginning, the rooftop battle, and the epic climax down the building. Both characters got to use a bunch of their abilities and the effects look great as usual. Both characters are portrayed really well, the voice acting is great, and their dialogue is full of the exaggerated swagger of a black teen. I also really like the death, even if it is a bit basic. So, all in all, easily the second best per season premiere. Dante vs. Bayonetta is still better by a country mile, though. John Talbane vs. Saberwolf was fucking amazing. The choreography was excellent throughout the entire fight, with the brief fight on the side of the wall and the final battle being really well done especially. The animation is great with good effects to match. Both characters' voice acting and dialogue is great. The track is amazing and is almost my favorite of this season. They used the environment pretty well throughout the fight. The death was amazing and brutal and is probably my favorite of the season. And finally, the gore in the fight really helps add to the animation and choreography, even if I wish there was a bit more of it. As for negatives, the start of the fight was kind of slow, but it luckily picked up after what was shown on the cast. The setup was just okay, and I wish Saberwolf used his killer instinct, and that's it for negatives. The fight was just really good and managed to exceed all of my expectations. Obi-Wan speaking exclusively in prequel quotes is exactly what I wanted from this fight. Anyways, this fight is really good. The animation is excellent looking, and the lighting in the middle portion of the fight is movie tier quality. The choreography is great with some amazing scenes like the Genjutsu scene, the Chidori and knife and lightsaber clash, and the entirety of the middle segment, which was just really well done. The fight was also really funny. Obi-Wan obviously just spoke in meme lines, but the 1,000 Years of High Ground scene added some good comedy. The effects looked amazing throughout the fight, and the track was really good. I also liked all the subtle references to the characters throughout the fight, like how when Kakashi loses his Sharingan, his Chidori turns purple, or how Obi-Wan mostly stays on the defensive until he can get that one good hit in. The build-up to the death was also really good, even if the death was a bit boring. As for negatives, there was a bit of jank throughout the fight, mainly in the third half. The death was kind of boring, as I already mentioned, and I wish Kamui was actually used. It makes sense that Obi-Wan dodged it, but it could have been really cool if the final clash happened in Kamui. And that's all. Overall, this episode is really good and 10 times better than the other SFM fight this season. This 100% deserved to be a season premiere. Flash vs. Sonic is currently my favorite sprite fight of the entire show. I want to get over the negatives quick, so we'll start with them. So first off, Wally did use a lot of abilities in the fight. Compared to the amount of abilities these two characters have, they barely scratched the surface. Secondly, Super Sonic is shafted pretty hard. I get that Wally doesn't have any super form, so I kind of understand why they breeze through him, but it still sucks. Finally, Ultrasonic's line at the end is pretty cringe, bro. But other than that, everything is positive. So let's talk about why I love this fight. First off, the choreography is fucking amazing. Their speed is conveyed super well throughout the fight, especially in the hand-drawn blur scenes. The fight remains tense throughout the entire duration, and it really keeps you on the edge of your seat. And this battle is possibly my favorite moment in the entire show, or the season, which is the scene where Wally tries to steal Ultrasonic's speed, but Sonic just keeps moving forward as the music and effects start to swell, and it's just so damn good looking. The animation is good with some beautiful looking effects. The fight is hilarious from the dialogue at the start to the moment where Sonic waits for Flash to finish going around the planet. The death is great, and this fight actually handles time travel pretty well. The setup is hilarious, and I love it. The settings they used were great, and the trek is so good. It's definitely my favorite of the season, and currently my third favorite of all time. Overall, this fight is absolutely amazing, even with its negatives, but it just barely lost to my number 2. What a way to close out the season. Hulk vs. Broly was incredible, no pun intended. The animation was great with some incredible looking scenes and amazing effects that are probably the best of the season. The choreography is amazing. The fight just has so much energy to it as the fight and destruction escalate throughout the fight. There are so many good scenes from it that I don't have enough time to cover them because I need to get this video out soon. Going back to that destruction part, the destruction in this fight so far is the best of the entire show. It's that good. We have them go from destroying planets to destroying everything in the damn galaxy and all the way to breaking the fabric of fucking reality. It's so much fun to watch. The track is amazing and it really helps highlight certain parts of the fight. The dialogue and voice acting are also good, especially with Hulk's lines. You get some genuinely good shit in the fight. The character models look great and so do their super forms, but on the topic of super forms, the transformations in the fight are pretty bad. The new forms just kind of appear with no real build-up or oomph to them. Also, the death is just okay and also a bit confusing. But other than those two negatives, this fight is amazing and a great way to end the season. This is currently my third favorite fight of the entire show. It's that good. Literally, my only complaint about it is that the Goro model looks a bit weird. So with that singular negative out of the way, let's talk about why this is my favorite fight of this season. First off, the choreography is amazing. Every scene is done so well, and there's so many memorable moments. From the seismic toss to the 1,000 punches to Goro's fire breath. The fight also keeps this high-intensity, fun, and fast-paced throughout the entire duration, and it works wonders. I'm not joking when I say I watched this fight over 7 times the day it came out. The animation is also incredible. The seismic toss looks beautiful, and the effects are incredible, especially the fire ones. The fight is hilarious with such good jokes like Goro being angry at Machamp only saying his name. The setup is hilarious, and the death is so damn good. The build-up of them ripping each other's arms off leading to this incredible shot of Machamp, which then leads to an amazingly choreographed and animated death. The voice acting is great, and the Machamp model is so good that you can't even tell it's handmade. The track isn't one of my all-time favorites, but it's still great and full of that high intensity. Overall, everything in this fight just comes together to make one of the best fight in the show's history. It's that good, and I love it to bits. And that's my list. As for my thoughts on the season as a whole, I loved it, and it's probably my favorite season so far. The overall quality of episodes isn't as good as Season 6 and maybe even Season 5, but honestly, I feel like trading a very little bit of quality for a much more quantity this season was a pretty good trade. And that's not to say this season didn't hit some high points. It has my current 3rd, 4th, and maybe even 5th fight of the entire show. So yeah, I really love this season, and I genuinely cannot wait for Season 8. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. If you wouldn't mind, consider leaving a like or even subscribing, as this is the biggest and my favorite video that I've put out so far. But yeah, expect more videos on Death Battle, and I'll see you guys in the next video.